Okay, so I'm fast forwarding to day 11 because there's, the times in between there, they've been pretty straightforward trades. But this one is interesting because it brings in the retrace element that we haven't discussed. So because it's the first trade of the day, we need to mark the start bar, and there it is. So we take our measuring tool PTD1, which is in yellow. I've taken away the letters because we should know them by now. And we try and find out where we get permission to draw, and it happens that we now have it to a downward trend line, and that's basically it. It starts over here. So we draw this trend line. Just one moment. So the trend line is drawn, and looks like we have to redraw. Wow, this is a real redraw. Hang on. You have to see if there's a redraw here. Well, let's just say, for argument's sake, that there is a break. It looks like there isn't. It may come all the way down here. Okay, but I want there to be like an example where just make sure that they got this right. Okay, so we redraw that one. Okay, so that's more like it. Okay, so that fails. Okay, so we have an entry here and get stopped out, so we mark that as a failed entry. And the first thing we do is at that entry point we mark this as the start bar. For the second trade, we get rid of this measuring tool because we don't need it. We're now in our second trade, and it's PTD1. And what you'll notice here is the permission to draw criteria is met down here, but we do not have permission to draw, even though the distance has met PTD2. The other criteria has not been met, which is we're drawing a downward trend line, so I'm going to go to the downward trend lines. On the second or third trade, price must move below 0.1 by at least one PTD, by at least PTD2. And so we've got the first part. It's moved below 0.1, which in this case happens to be the same as the start bar. Okay, remember the 0.1 is the highest point between start bar and PTD criteria met. In this case they were both the same. So that's the first part has been checked. And if the direction is in the same as the previous trade, which is the case, the first trade was downward, the second case is downward. If the trade is in the direction the same as the previous trade, then price must retrace from new low of the day since last entry level by the retrace amount. So we know that this tool is also our target, stop, redraw and retrace measuring tool. So what the rules say is that since the entry or start bar, price must retrace by this distance from the low, and it doesn't do that here or any of these places. It doesn't do it there, and it does not even do it there. It retraces a little bit but continues to go down, and the reason for that is because price could continue to go. We don't want to enter until we've seen some decent resistance. So eventually price continues to go down, and the retrace rule has not been met, and therefore no second trade takes place. Now normally we've seen in other examples the second trade would be in the opposite direction of the previous trade. So that would by default fill the requirement of a bounce being met. So that's why it doesn't apply. But when it's in the same direction, we need this bounce before we can take a trade, a long entry. So let's look for another example.